Coaster! Welcome to COASTER-net Uncut! What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of COASTER-net Uncut! I'm, of course, Andrew Marchek from Chicago, Illinois. Joined once again, Mr. European Vacation. We're going to continue here this evening. Danny Miller, what parks are we looking at tonight?
Yeah, so we will be looking at two parks actually tonight, and very fittingly, we'll talk about them together. They will be the two Walibi parks, Walibi Belgium and Walibi Holland. Walibi Holland was actually one of the very first parks we went to. It was actually the first big park we went to. We went to Tato Park first, but was the very first park we went to that, that a lot of people know about. And then Walibi Belgium was kind of in the middle of the park, or in the middle of the trip. So we'll talk about both of those. I'm going to talk about Walibi Belgium first, since there's a little bit less subject matter there. We spent full days at both of these parks, had the cut-the-line systems at both parks, got to ride as much as we wanted to. Walibi Holland we did on our own. Walibi Belgium was part of the Coaster Crew trip. So Walibi Belgium is not too far outside of Brussels, and I'm gonna try and maintain the correct pronunciation throughout the entire show, because we wanted to know, because we've heard different pronunciations of this before. A lot of people just say wallaby, like the animal, yeah. And we found out, or if it was wallaby or something weird like that, and it's close to wallaby, but they pronounce both I's with like the long E, or they pronounce the first I with the long E. So it's Walibi. So both of the I's are the long E sound. Instead of Wallaby, it's Walibi. So Walibi Belgium, Walibi Holland. It's gonna be
okay, I'm not even gonna try.
Yeah, it's strange, but
because their logo is the animal, so it's just an accent.
Perhaps that is certainly an argument. But well, that's the mascot's name.
Oh, but is that what a wallaby looks like though? Like the animal?
See, now we're gonna have to look this up here.
Yeah. Now I want to know. I'm gonna look it up real quick.
What is a wallaby? Is a small. So it's
a kangaroo.
It's almost like a kangaroo, right?
Yeah, it's a kangaroo, and the logo is a kangaroo. So it's just an accent to me.
It's very close.
And wallaby spelled differently too.
Yeah, so it's not so the argument there is perhaps the spelling dictates the pronunciation. I don't know. There's so many odd things over there. But
those foreigners.
they're very strange, aren't they? So Walibi Belgium. Let's
why we left. It's why we left Europe, Danny. It's why everyone left. They don't know what the hell they're doing. We just left.
That's right. As far as roller coasters go, and it's going to become very obvious that I'm on RCDB here. 8 roller coasters here at Walibi Belgium. Very well themed, a lot of Big Thunder Mountain type of feel to it. Actually has a little airtime hill towards the end of the first half, has 2 lift hills that are side by side, sort of partially enclosed. If you're lucky enough, like we were on 1 or 2 of our rides, you can actually get on the lift hill next to another train, which is on the other one. So very, very cool. A nice little airtime hill, lots of good theming. And what's very strange, they actually have like an observation deck up on top of what looks like a rock near the mining town or whatever, that you can actually just go up and watch the entire ride and get pictures of the entire ride. So that was pretty cool. Calamity Mine, very fun mine train for sure. The Cobra is their Vekoma Boomerang, really nothing special to talk about there. Fun Pilot was actually new for 2019. It's just a junior coaster, family coaster. Nothing really to write home about. Loup-Garou, which if you know Rougarou, translates to werewolf. And actually their signage does also say werewolf on it underneath the werewolf wooden roller coaster, whatever the signage actually says. It's been a while now. It's been a few months, but it does actually say werewolf underneath it.
Also interesting.
The
Also interesting. It says that Loop Guru will get a new theme for 2021.
Yes. Okay, and I believe that has to do with they're adding 2 new roller coasters for 2021.
Yeah.
They're adding a kiddie coaster, and they're adding an Intamin hyper coaster, which will be the tallest and fastest coaster in the Benelux, and I believe it is going in that area, and they're refurbishing that area. So it will likely be getting a new theme to go along with that. That is my guess. Loop Guru is funny because it's a Vekoma wood coaster. It rides kind of like a Vekoma wood coaster, but it rides how you would expect a Vekoma wood coaster to ride. There's only a handful of those. Robin Hood, which became Untamed, the RMC. It was also a Vekoma wood coaster, and I believe Thunder Coaster at Tusenfryd in the Norway is another Vekoma wood coaster. I'm not sure if there's any more than that.
Well, it's a little upsetting to me because I was kind of when I saw this, I was kind of hoping that maybe Loop Guru would be RMC like Robin Hood was, but now that they're just giving it a new theme, that seems to be off the table.
Perhaps. Certainly a good candidate for an RMC. This ride actually had, if you step back, the double down in the middle of the ride, there's a couple good drops. There's a lot of shimmy shake to it, but it was one of those rides that I had to laugh on. A couple of the helixes are certainly tit jigglers, as we like to call it. But it was a fun ride. I rode it twice. There's some good airtime in the back on a few of the drops. The lap bars are very large. They're very heavy. The trains are nice and cushy and padded, though. It's not painful. I wouldn't call it painful or uncomfortable. But certainly when you think Vekoma and wood coaster, this ride is exactly what you would expect out of that combination. But a fun ride nonetheless. Certainly an RMC candidate in the future, I would think, especially if they see the benefits of doing it to Robin Hood at the sister park, turning that into and then they have Vampire, which is your standard Vekoma SLC, one of the early ones. One of the worst ones I've been on, and we rode a couple on this trip. There was one at Haida Park, there's one at Movie Park, there was this one here, El Condor, which is the SLC at Walibi Holland. Just jump over to that one as well. Was the very original Vekoma SLC, if I remember correctly, El Condor, and all of them are very, very bad. The one at Movie Park was maybe the best one, and even that one was not good. All of them old school harnesses, no vests here, so certainly not enjoying any of those while we're on the trip. And then the 3 standouts really here. I mean, Calamity Mine is certainly one of their better coasters. The other 3 here, Tiki Waka, which is one of the fun little Gerschlauer bobsleds style. Now, it's not bobsled in like the mock bobsled where you're in the trough. That's the model name.
Where it's not a real roller coaster. So.
Right, according to Andy, not a real roller coaster.
Yeah.
The bobsleds model is what Gerschlauer names their wild mouse style ride. We mentioned this a little bit before in the Movie Park episode where I talked about Van Helsing's factory. And I mentioned that there would be more of these coming up, and Tiki Waka is one of them. Certainly family friendly, not a lot of huge drops, no inversions, abrupt little drops, some tight turns, and some good theming. This is in like their tiki themed area, so you got to go through a lot of like Hawaiian and Caribbean looking huts, and you go through some theming and no tunnels, but sort of arches that look like they're made out of bamboo. You do some turns and some drops and hills over the water. And this is actually the ride I selected to be my number 750. I wanted something a little bit unique, a little bit out there. And knowing that I was going to hit it at Walibi Belgium, I just chose to do Tiki Waka because certainly there's a lot of these rides in Europe, not a whole lot in the States. So I thought it would be cool to do something a little unique, and celebrated my 750th coaster with the Tiki bar right next door to Tiki Waka, sold fruity mixed drinks, tropical drinks at the Tiki bar next door. I got the Pulsar, which was a nice blue raspberry and blue curacao and some orange and vodka mix in there. A very, very tasty drink. And it was a warm day. It was a warm, sunny day there when we were at Walibi, Belgium. So certainly the Pulsar hit the spot after riding Tiki Waka. And speaking of Pulsar, that is perhaps the ride that is most well known at this park. And for our friends in Texas who are excited for Aquaman Power Wave coming this year, Pulsar is basically the same exact idea, the same exact ride. It is the mock power splash where you start out there. Now, I'm not sure about Aquaman, but Pulsar has the turntable, so they can actually run two boats. And basically very, very simple. You start off in the station. There is a spike directly in front of you. There's a sort of a speed hill with the launch magnets behind you, and then sort of a flat section that goes down below water level, and then a reverse spike. What happens is you rotate out of the turntable, you launch backwards over the speed hill, up the back spike, and the water level in the splashdown area has been lowered. So you don't splash down, you go up the back spike, then you go back through, you accelerate over the speed hill in the middle, go up the front spike, then you go backwards again, back over the speed hill, through the emptied out splashdown area. And it's really cool if you're in the front seat, after you go through that, and you get a little bit of hang time on the back spike, you can actually see the dams open up and see all the water rush in to the splashdown area. And then when you come back down that spike, you do your big splashdown, and then you slowly coast over the speed hill back into the station area. You once the other train is loaded up, the turntable rotates, and rinse and repeat, and you do it all over again. No pun intended on the rinse and repeat. But a lot of fun. Certainly a very fun ride. Rode it a couple times. Good for a hot day. This is certainly going to be a welcome ride in Texas, for sure. Going to be very popular in those hot Texas summers. So I think personally, I think this type of ride is a very good addition for Six Flags Over Texas.
And I just looked at it. Aquaman does not have the turntable, according to the animation.
It didn't appear to, which is kind of a shame, because certainly not going to be a high capacity ride. Yeah. Even Pulsar had about a 30 to 40 minute wait, and it was a sunny day for the most part, and it was warm. It wasn't incredibly warm, but mid 70s, high 70s, and the sun was out most of the day, and got a little bit of a drizzle here and there, but certainly going to be popular in those hot Texas summers. So definitely a ride you want to get on early at Six Flags Over Texas, even though the heat of the day is maybe the best time to ride it.
Yeah, it looks like for Over Texas, it does look like the theming is at least the entrance is pretty nice. It looks like it's going to have a really nice, like, ornate, Atlantean entranceway. The ride itself, it looks like the station doesn't have much going on, but the color scheme, this is what I'm a little excited for, that there's a possibility that I'm going to get down to Texas this year, and it looks like a really fun ride. Like,
it is.
It's kind of like a take on like a Wicked Twister, almost like a cross between like a Wicked Twister and like a half pipe almost, with the splashdown element added in there. So I think it's gonna be a great time. I would say that's probably about the category of ride that I would put it into. Certainly nothing that we're going to be writing home about. Nothing that I would myself be making a special trip for. But certainly a fun ride that I rode it a couple times for sure. And I'm not typically a water ride guy. I don't enjoy getting soaking wet. How wet do you get on this though?
I would say it is if you're in the front row, you get wetter. because the seat backs do go up pretty high. So if you're not in the front row, you only get wet if you're on the edges because you do get a splash on your shoulder if you're on either edge. If you're not in the front row and you're in one of the middle seats, if you keep your feet up off the ground, which the way those seats are, it's not that hard to do. The lap bars are kind of in a box at the base. You can get off essentially bone dry if you sit in the middle, one of the middle rows and in one of the middle seats. If you sit on the edge of the front row, you are going to get fairly wet. So I think it's kind of, and I don't know if they'll let you choose your seat. They were not letting us choose seats at Walibi Belgium. I did end up in the front row in one ride, and I still didn't get, overly soaked. And like I said, it was a warm day, so it wasn't uncomfortable.
Well, with water rides, the biggest thing is I don't want to be walking around with wet shoes all day long. Like that's my whole concern. Like you get on some of these water rides and you're sitting in 4 inches of water at the bottom, and it's like, okay, this is stupid.
No, and it's not quite that bad. And again, like I said, it's easy to keep your feet off the ground on this ride the way it was set up. So if wet shoes is the biggest thing you're worried about, I think you can avoid that fairly easily.
Okay, cool.
The last coaster to talk about here is Psyche Underground, which
looks really cool.
It is. It's a lot of fun. And, you would say, oh, well, it's just a Schwarzkopf shuttle loop. And it is, but it's not.
One, those are really fun rides, so that you can start
there.
Are.
They are very fun rides. Here's the history of this ride. This was built in 1982, and for several years, it was just a regular old shuttle loop. You got in the station, you launched, you went through the loop, up the spike, back through the loop, back. At some point, and I'm not sure of the entire history, but I believe they were having noise issues or whatever, so they enclosed the loop. And if you're on RCDB, you'll see plenty of pictures of what it looks like now, which is completely enclosed. But there was an intermittent step there where just the loop and the launch areas were enclosed. And at that point, it was called the turbine. And at some point, looks like 2009 to 2013, it was standing but not operating. The loop was enclosed in 1999 to reduce noise. So there you go. RCDB tells us that. And then for 2013, after a refurbishment, it reopened as Psyche Underground, and the entire thing was enclosed. Now, it's really cool. So you go in, and basically it talks about it's got this whole storyline where you're sort of in this underground area, and there's these little critters that are in there, and they're in the station and whatnot. The station has lighting and theming. It has sort of a mock operator, or like a TV screen where it looks like they're in an operator's booth, and they hit some sort of button and things go haywire, and you get launched through the loop. And inside the big enclosure where the loop is, there's lights and there's theming and there's noise, and there's like a figure that you go through. It's really, really cool that you see there. And then you come back through it. You go back through the whole thing. The whole thing's enclosed, which is really cool. Certainly a different experience. And this is the kind of thing that, makes a standard old Schwarzkopf shuttle loop, which are fun rides, and really makes it a fun and unique experience that you can't get anywhere else, which I really appreciated, especially for a park like this where there's, the roller coasters are not out of this world amazing. They don't really have that standout ride. But between Psyche Underground, Pulsar, Tiki Waka, Calamity Mine, they have a decent decent collection of rides. I rewrote all of those rides a couple times. They were fun rides. And they have a nice collection of non-coasters as well. They have probably the fastest bumper cars I've ever ridden. And they were wild, and they have a large arena. They have 2 very strong shooting dark rides. They have a Curse of Tut, and it's spelled out the entire way. What is it? Tutankhamun. Mm-hmm. So the Curse of Tutankhamun, or however that's pronounced. And that is very, very strong, very, very well done. And I don't know what the threshold is. And I don't know if it's you have to hit certain targets or your vehicle has to do a certain score. But towards the end, you can go on different paths depending on your score, and you actually win in one and you actually lose in one, where like the explorer is tied up or whatever, and he's being attacked by the mummies, or there's another one where you're victorious and you find the treasure or whatever. So there are two different endings depending on how your score does. I don't know what that threshold value is, but there are different endings that you can get and different paths you can take, which is pretty cool. That's their older one. And their newest one, which is new for 2019, which, spoiler alert here, in the Ride War Choice Awards for 2019, this ride got my vote for favorite non-coaster ride. I liked it better than any of the 2019 non-coaster rides that I rode in the States, is Popcorn Revenge, which is another shooting ride. It is a screen-based shooting ride where you are shooting at popcorn kernels on different on different screens. And to lay it out a little bit here, it's one of the trackless dark rides. So you go in and you go into this big area, and it almost looks like the lobby of a movie theater, and it's circular. And there's a big pole in the middle that have TV screens on them and whatnot, and you see the popcorn kernels popping up there. And then you go off, and it's a random order, I believe, that you go off into them, or maybe it's a set order. I'm not really sure. We rode it a couple times. I wasn't paying up a whole lot of attention to the order, but if you look, you go off into the different movie theaters. You go off into the different theaters, and on each screen, you sit in front of each screen for a set amount of time, and the popcorn kernels are essentially reenacting famous scenes from famous movies. So there's like a Frankenstein one or something, and there's like a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and then there's all sorts of other ones. And they're reenacting these scenes from the movies, but the popcorn kernels have replaced the actors. So it's these popcorn kernels, and there's one where they're like zombies. There's all sorts of different ones, and at each time you then pull out of the theater back into that open area, and you're moving about with the other vehicles that are at different points of the ride. And there are other screens that just sort of open up, and you see popcorn kernels on the screen riding in a ride vehicle shooting at you, which is kind of cool. So in between the movie scenes, you're back in this main area. So not only are you competing to shoot these screens in the common area with the other people in your vehicle, there's other people in 4 or 5 other vehicles also shooting at these screens, which is pretty neat. And the entire time, the smell of popcorn is just being pumped in. So it smells like a movie theater the entire time. And then, of course, they have all different sorts of brands and styles: the popcorn, kettle corn, the white cheddar, the caramel corn, the chocolate covered popcorn. They have all sorts of different kinds of popcorn that you can then buy afterwards, because you've just ridden this 4-minute ride smelling popcorn, and the queue line smells like popcorn. So if you've been waiting in the line, you've probably been smelling popcorn for at least an hour. So super adorable, super cute, and super, super fun. We rode this ride several times. Honestly, this was my favorite ride at this park.
So is it kind of like Toy Story Mania in that regard then, or not really, where you have
yes, it's very similar in feel to this. I think it's better done, and maybe that's just because it's newer, certainly. But if you Google image search Popcorn Revenge Walibi Belgium, you will see plenty of images from this, and it is very, very neat. Very, very cool. Very, very fun. Certainly some of the most fun I had on the entire trip on this ride.
Did you have some popcorn afterwards, though, or no?
We did.
Okay.
We got a bag of kettle corn afterwards.
Yeah.
And we walked around munching on some kettle corn.
I was going to be disappointed if they didn't have that shill set up there for you, because if you've been smelling popcorn for an hour and a half, you should at least be able to purchase some at the end.
This is cool. I actually found a little thing here where it shows you sort of the layout here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 different movie theater areas that you go into, and then there's like a factory area at the end. So you see like 4 or 5 different movies here. I'm sure if you Google, you can find out what they are specifically. But yeah, they're okay. So here they are. I'm waiting for this image to load. So you go into an introduction area, and then there's epic fantasy. Then there's superhero. There's a space one. Dispatch hub. Oh, dispatch hub. Okay, so that's over to the side. And then there's a horror night movie, and then there's a pirate movie. I believe that seems to ring a bell now. It's been a few months, obviously, but those seem to ring a bell. So they're not directly tied to something, but the superhero one has a very Avengers type feel. The horror movie has sort of like a zombie Walking Dead type of feel to it. They're almost, I would almost describe them as parodies of your favorite movie that like a Pirates of the Caribbean. They're sort of, and these are things that could totally be interchangeable over the course of the years. They could certainly change these out for other ones, but that's basically what you're going to be expecting. And they have the popcorn plushes. So they have the plushes of the evil popcorn kernels.
Oh, man.
So I immediately thought of you when I saw this.
That would definitely be going back there, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny, they have the movie style theatrical posters in the waiting queue, and they're all popcorn themed. So like instead of Harry Potter, they have Henry Popper. and it's the wizard, and he's holding the golden snitch. I remember in the superhero one, they actually have a popcorn kernel that gets angry, and he turns into the Hulk.
Well, and if you like superheroes, you can subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll be hearing all about superheroes and our Marvel reviews that we've just started. So
we're just getting started on the much anticipated Marvel series. Oh, and I remember this now because I saw a picture. They actually have a plush of the Hulk popcorn kernel, and it's green. It's got the purple pants on, and he's like doing the Hulk smash.
That's
very funny. Very, very cool. And they have the plushes from like from the different movies. Like they have the pirate one, and they have the zombie one. Super, super cool. Just such a fun ride. So that pretty much wraps it up for Walibi Belgium. Certainly a very fun park. They do have a Vekoma Madhouse there as well, which was it's sort of like an Arabian Nights style one, which is a little bit different than some of the ones that we see over here. Certainly different than the Houdini style, but lots and lots of fun at this park. Certainly they don't have the standout roller coaster that's going to be in your top 10, but a very solid park all the way around. A very pretty park as well.
But when they add that Intamin mega coaster, that could change very quickly too. Where that becomes a headliner, and then you have a nice little supporting cast. So maybe by 2021, this park might be somewhere that you really want to put on your list to go.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. And this is a park that if they didn't add any, if they didn't have that headlining coaster adding in a couple of years, this is maybe a park that we wouldn't go back to for a very long time. But knowing that they're going to make that big addition here in a couple of years, this is probably going to be a park that when we do get back into that area, that perhaps this is a park that we're going to revisit for that new coaster there. And knowing that they've got a solid supporting cast and a couple of dark rides that are a lot of fun, this is a park that I could certainly see myself returning to at some point in the future. So that's always good news. So shall we move on to Walibi Holland, which I'm sure is the park that a lot of people want to hear about for many reasons, but mainly to talk about Untamed, right? I mean, that's what we want to talk about. So why don't we unlike the Phantasialand show where we talk about Terran right out of the gate, let's save Untamed for the end. Shall we?
Because it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of other stuff here. There's a few things there's aside 2 other coasters.
Yeah, I mean, aside from the coasters, and they do have the collection of coasters is much stronger at Walibi Holland, for sure. Actually, probably one of the stronger collections on the entire trip, I would say. Even though in terms of numbers, you wouldn't necessarily think that. Really, the only non-coaster thing to note here is their Vekoma Madhouse, which is themed to Merlin's Castle. A lot of Vekoma madhouses at these parks over here. Obviously, Vekoma being in the Netherlands, it would make sense that there's a lot in that area. So there's one at Walibi, Belgium. There's a mini madhouse style type ride at Europa Park. Efteling has one of the very first Vekoma madhouses. Efteling is sort of the pride of the Netherlands. One of the very first Vekoma coasters is there. A lot of their rides are Vekoma there as well. We'll talk about Efteling more in a future show, but there is a Vekoma Madhouse here as well. Very well done. Merlin's Castle is well themed. I love the pre-shows, especially in the Netherlands, because they're speaking Dutch, and Dutch doesn't sound like a real language. And Adam Beard, he actually went to Efteling back last spring on his spring break, and he was sort of able to lead the way as we went through Efteling. And I remember him saying as we were on our way over there, he said, "I can't wait to see your reaction to some of the stuff in the Netherlands, because Dutch it sounds like a fantasy language, and it really does. And when you see the way that some of the words are spelled, and that is not a diss if you speak Dutch, or if you are Dutch or from the Netherlands, or have Dutch descent. That is not a knock on it at all. I can honestly say that I enjoyed our time in the Netherlands the most of the entire trip. I really enjoyed the people there, even exploring downtown Amsterdam, which we did the day after Walibi Holland before we left to go on to Hamburg. Really enjoyed that as well, seeing the sights, talking to the people. And the Dutch people were super, super friendly, especially at Walibi Holland. And they have a knack for just knowing if you speak English or Dutch and if you're American. And I'm sure it was just the way we were dressed, because we're walking up to these rides in cargo shorts and roller coaster t-shirts, which is not the way they dress over in Europe, generally speaking. But we had so much fun talking to some of the employees too, in particular at Untamed and Lost Gravity, where we had some really good experiences, and some coaster fans too, for sure. So let's talk about the roller coasters here. They have Draco, which is their kiddie coaster. El Condor, which I mentioned already, is the original Vekoma or one of the original Vekoma SLCs. Yes, the original. I wanted to fact check that. RCDB tells me that Condor was the first Vekoma SLC. So it is the prototype model. So it's slightly different from most of the ones you're probably used to. It is identical to T3 in terms of layout. T3 is slightly different than all the other North American ones. A few changes here and there to the ending, and the first drop is at a different angle. I think the first drop goes over the last turn instead of going under the last turn like it does on most of them, and the length is slightly different. So T3 and El Condor are clones of one another. T3 was the original in North America, came shortly after Condor. Now we'll talk about some of the unique ones here. Speed of Sound is their Vekoma Boomerang. Why did I say that's unique? So Speed of Sound has a theme, and it's very, very cool. So Speed of Sound's, the lift hill that you go backwards on in the middle of the ride, at the beginning of the ride, is mostly enclosed. Once you get maybe like 30, 40 feet up, it's enclosed, and it's got strobes and flashing lights and whatnot. There's onboard audio on the cars, on the trains, and the trains have the vest restraint, so you don't get the headbanging. And the station is themed to a radio station. And you've got like this techno music, like, and you've got the disco lights and everything going on. And the music that's being played in the station at this like hip hop beatbox style radio station is also being played on the speakers in sync with, so it's not like overlapping audio. And what happens, the audio is playing throughout the entire time. And what happens is as you go up into the lift hill, the enclosed lift hill, you're hearing this music playing, and it's building up, and then the beat drops, and that's when you drop off the lift hill, and then it's this high-paced techno music, and you can find it on YouTube. You can find the music that they play, and you go through the cobra roll, you go through the loop, and then as you catch on the second lift hill, it slows down, and it's like the and then you release and you go backwards, and it does like the record scratch thing, and then it's a remix of the music when you go back through it backwards, and it's super, super cool. And it's like, and people talk about, oh, you're just saying it's better because it's in Europe, and it's like, they did this to a Vekoma boomerang. Like, of course that's better than a normal Vekoma boomerang. And it helps that you're not headbanging the entire way. But super, super fun. I mean, it's one of those things that, you walk up to the Vekoma boomerang, and we had no idea that it was like this when we walked up to it. We're just like, oh, okay, they put a little theming on this radio station, cool, Vekoma boomerang, whatever. Oh, it's got the vest, at least we're not going to headbang. Oh, it's got onboard audio. Wait a minute, this is really cool. What have they done to this thing? Just a lot of fun. Express Platform 13, the next Vekoma launch coaster here. For those of you who are familiar with Rock and Roller Coaster at Walt Disney World, a clone of Rock and Roller Coaster. It is outdoors except for the launch area and the break area. So the entire ride itself takes place over water, in very similar to like a Joker's Jinx style layout. If you know the layout of Rock and Roller Coaster, if you've seen pictures of this one, because it is outdoors, you can see it. Used to be Superman themed when the two Walibi parks were were briefly owned and run by Six Flags, actually. If you've played Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 and you've seen Six Flags Holland and Six Flags Belgium, these are the same two parks that we're talking about here. When they converted it to Express Platform 13, they gave it like a haunted subway theme, which is very cool. The launch track is enclosed, and you're basically being launched out of the subway and whatnot. Coolest thing about this ride is not on the ride. Andy, and if you plan on going to Walibi Holland at some point, skip ahead maybe a minute or two if you don't want to be spoiled by this. Okay, Andy, you ready for this?
Yeah.
The queue is a walk-through haunt.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. And there's scare actors in it. And this is not a haunt thing. We were there at the beginning of August. This is something they always do. So if you know the entrance to the Manhattan Express coaster at New York, in Las Vegas, where you walk up the stairs, this is exactly like that. It feels like Vegas. You're walking up to a subway, and then they let you in, and you're walking through like the subway corridors, and you're walking through like the broken down, haunted, abandoned subways, and they have projection screens showing like sparks flying and rats running around, and then you go into this dark corridor where you're like tilted up on edge, and there's scare actors, there's not a ton of them, but there's a couple scare actors in it, and then you walk down like the enclosed steel tunnel as you get into the station, and then when you're in the station, there's doors in front of you there, so you can't see the train, and like the lights flicker and dim when trains get dispatched, and you can see that it says platform 13, and it's got the clock on it that's like flickering and everything. And when you get dispatched, the lights go down, and you hear like the subway, you hear the alarm going off in the subway, and that's when you launch out. And then when you come back into the break run, you come into, and again, if you've listened again and you don't want to be spoiled, skip ahead another 30 seconds. So when you come into the break run, you're sitting there almost like What's in the Shed, like Mystic Timbers, but it's a broken down subway train sitting in front of you that's like blaring its horn, and the red light is flashing. And then when you're clear to dispatch, it turns green, and then you go by this broken down subway car, and then it bursts into flames as you go. And then there's real fire when you come into the exit platform. And the roller coaster itself is nothing special. It's got the obtrusive over it's got the Vekoma boomerang trains and those shoulder harnesses that you would expect to find across the park. So the ride itself bangs you around a little bit. It's really nothing to write home about, but everything outside of the roller coaster part of this, the theming, the queue, everything is just fantastic. We rode it twice. And we wouldn't have ridden it twice if it was just a pedestrian roller coaster, but we rode it twice just so we could go through all of that. And it was a lot of fun. This would be your type of experience. I would just say, just let me walk across the train when I get to the station when I re-ride. Say, I don't need to ride the ride again. I just want to go through everything else. Super fun.
So did that take you by surprise though, or did you kind of know that was going to happen?
No, absolutely. I had no clue. I had no clue. We kind of knew, Express Platform 13, we kind of knew what the theme was. We figured it was subway themed, had no idea about any of that. We thought, okay, it looks like there's a little bit of theming here. Had no idea it was cool. To the extent it was. And and you have to think, like, we went to Tato Park and we rode Q Cullen and, whatever, the day before. But this was really, when you think about it, our first real year, because Ireland is sort of feels like home because people are speaking English, kind of. You heard some Gaelic in there as well. But generally, Ireland still sort of felt like home. But we're in the Netherlands. People are speaking Dutch. They're not speaking English unless they know that we're American and they're speaking English to us. So we're hearing the Dutch. We're seeing the signs in Dutch. We are completely immersed in the fact that this is our first theme park experience in a non-English speaking country. And this is and it's right at the front of the park. So this is the very first thing we experienced over in Europe. And it's like, boy, it just set the stage for everything.
That's really cool though. Like that sets it apart,
It does. And it takes a very standard ride, which again, rock and roller coaster. If you were to take the building off, very pedestrian roller coaster. Rock and roller coaster is made by all the other stuff that they do to it. And this is very much the same thing, except the roller coaster part of it doesn't have any of that theming to it. And it's a very forgettable ride, to be quite honest with you. It's very average, but the experience of this ride is certainly something notable. So it's really, really a lot of fun. Let's wrap up here with the three big rides. So Lost Gravity, which is the Mach Big Dipper ride, very sort of, in my mind, the Mach ride's answer to the Gerstlauer Eurofighter. Boy, this ride is super, super weird and super, super fun. Lots of theming that goes along with this as well, which certainly adds to it. So the theme of this ride is literally that Earth has lost gravity and that gravity is not working anymore. So it does a lot of the hang time elements. It's got theme elements that make it seem like they're floating. When you walk in to the Cut the Line Pass area, you actually have to you have to enter through the back of a school bus, and the school bus has a TV screen on there telling you, the world has lost gravity, and it's got like these lines painted on the floor, and it makes you sort of dizzy when you're walking through it, and it's very, very odd, and you're going through, it's sort of got like a keyhole type element or two where you go through some of the theme elements. I would compare it, if you had a little bit more theming, to like a Daredevil dive at Six Flags Over Georgia, but the ride itself is actually better, where you get some hang time. It's got a speed hill in it. You've got the crazy first twisting drop. And there's one part towards the end of the ride where you do a 0G roll. And this for me was the moment on this ride. So you're going into a standard 0G roll. And what happens is right underneath the middle of the 0G roll, where you're completely upside down, there's a water cannon. And it shoots up. Oh, there's fire too. There's fire when you come around the turn on the mid-course, which is cool. But the moment for me is this water cannon shoots water just as you enter the 0G roll. And because of that, the water is going up as you're being turned upside down. So what happens when the water gets to its apex and starts to fall is when you are upside down. and then you start to right yourself at the other end of the 0G roll. So if you watch this blast, and it's a super simple effect, right? It's just a water cannon. If you watch the water as you're going through the element, it literally looks like the water is standing still and levitating in midair as you're doing the 0G roll around it. Because think about it, it's going up as you're upside down and rolling upside down, and then it slows down as you're slowing down, and then it's at its peak when it's directly above you, which is actually below you because you're upside down, and then you roll out of it and it starts to fall, but now you're going down with it and you're being right side up. It's super, super weird effect. Super, super cool. And that's a very simple visual that they just really timed the water squirt really with the maneuver happening on the ride. Very, very fun ride. Very, very cool. And a cool themed area around it. The coffee mug that I got for this one is very cool. So it's a regular coffee mug shaped where it's a little bit narrower at the bottom and wider at the top. And it's just, sort of an angled type coffee mug. But the handle is upside down. And when you flip it upside down so that the wider end is at the bottom, so it looks like the mug is upside down, that's where the opening is. So the entire coffee mug itself is actually upside down. And they had a lot of cool merchandise for this ride. The word lost in the logo is upside down and everything. Very, very cool. The other coaster here before we get to Untamed is Goliath, which is a former Thrilling 32 contender. The Intamin hyper coaster that it's been described to me. The Intamin hyper coaster that didn't quite eat all its Wheaties because it's only 151 feet tall, 154 foot drop, a little less than 4,000 feet tall, or 4,000 feet long, top speed 66 miles an hour. A lot of great airtime on this ride. And this is a ride that I had highly anticipated. This ride was in my top 5 in terms of most anticipated steel coasters here. Actually comes in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Actually came in at number 8 overall out of the steel coasters. And that sounds deceiving. Not a knock on this ride at all. This is a very, very strong ride. To me, I would put this ride in a Magnum XL 200 type category. The airtime is very strong, very sustained. It's got a nice Stengel dive element. It's got 2 low to the water helixes in the middle of the ride, and then it's got a return run of 3 very, very nice airtime hills with good sustained ejector airtime that we expect out of Intamin rides, right? I would say that those 3 hills, the airtime hill after the Sidewinder turns on Maverick, I would say the 3 airtime hills on the return run of this ride are very similar to those types of hills. Maybe not quite as abrupt, because the train's a little bit longer, but certainly that type of airtime. A very, very fun ride. The only knock that I'll give to this ride is it's got some good airtime at the beginning, it's got great airtime at the end, and it's got 2 really nice helixes. At the end of each of the helixes, there's sort of like the Intamin crossover airtime hill, and there's a little bit of a float of airtime on those 2 crossovers. It teases it. It doesn't really throw you out of your seat. It doesn't really throw you to the side. It sort of teases that there could be more there, but there's just not quite enough oomph in those 2 crossover hills for me. That to me is really the only thing keeping this from being maybe a top 20, top 25 ride. For me currently, this ride sits right at the number 40 mark on my steel rankings that I just submitted for my Thrilling 32. So this is a very strong ride. For me, I rank it in that category around a Magnum XL 200, around even a Twisted Colossus. Now, some people really, really love Twisted Colossus. That's lower on my list of RMCs. That's the type of category that, I put that in here. It's a very strong ride. it is just a little, it just loses a little bit in the pacing for me. If it had a little bit more of the pacing in the middle part of the ride, and I don't want to say speed, because the speed is excellent and the speed is great even at the end of the ride when you're going over those 3 hills at the end, because they're small hills and they provide great airtime. There's a great helix at the end of the ride into the brake run, which is very close to some bushes, and you have a very good sensation of speed. That middle part of the ride, it's like the elements are just a little bit too drawn out. They don't really, and you could argue that it's sort of a flow. A lot of the ride is ejector airtime and abrupt force, and this is sort of the middle of the ride where it tames it down a little bit. I just wish there was a little bit more in those 2 crossover elements. But other than that, Goliath at Walibi Holland gets 2 thumbs up for me. Rode it 6 or 7 times. It's very close to Untamed, so we bounced. The latter part of the day was a lot of jumping back and forth. Ride Untamed twice, ride Goliath twice, ride Untamed twice, ride Goliath twice. That was sort of the rhythm we got into for the last few hours of the day. And that was a very fun rhythm to get into. RMC Intamin, RMC Old School Intamin, really can't go wrong with that pair of rides. A very, very solid 1-2 punch. All right, Andy, are you ready for the grand finale here?
This is the thing we've been waiting for.
Untamed. This came in as my number 2 anticipated steel coaster of the entire trip. I had Expedition G-Force higher because of Expedition G-Force's longevity. It's been very highly ranked in many, many polls for many, many years. And Untamed, even though seemed to have all of the elements and all the ingredients to be a world-class roller coaster, just opened in July, really still an unknown for us. Is it going to have the speed? You and I said when it first opened, we said this ride looks like, you called it the RMC All-Star Coaster. Is what you called it when we talked about it. And I had this at the top of my most anticipated 2019 rides because I honestly thought it would be the best new for 2019 ride that I rode. I can happily report on that it definitely is. It's definitely better than Copperhead Strike. It's definitely better than Yukon Striker. It is definitely better than Steel Curtain. There is no question. What I did not expect is to have some of the discussions that we ended up having by the end of the day. And we rode this ride 12 times. And I went into this trip, again, expecting, I had Expedition G-Force as the most anticipated ride. And after 12 rides on this ride, and Adam and I rode this ride probably 5 or 6 times in a row to end the day. And as we were walking down the exit ramp at 7 o'clock when the park closed, and we were walking out of the park, I looked at Adam and I said, I don't think we're riding a better ride than that on this trip. I'm going to say that right now. I don't think Expedition G-Force will be better than that ride. I'll bury the hatchet again here and say that Untamed was my favorite ride on the entire trip. So I had a little bit of foresight there. Not by much. Expedition G-Force and Terran are both very, very strong rides. And I rank both of them in my top 10. I liked Untamed better. And so now all of a sudden we're getting into some pretty high marks here for this ride. And here's the best way to describe it. And I described it to Rob Dole in this sense. Most of us have ridden Steel Vengeance at this point. Most of the people watching this show have watched Steel Vengeance. Take Steel Vengeance, make it half the size. You with me so far? That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
Done.
That's what this ride is.
Period.
That's what this ride is. It's Steel Vengeance at half the size. And
that's kind of what we said though going in. That when we did
that's what we said
show,
it could be. That's what we said it could be, and I am happy to report that's exactly what it is. To break it down a little bit element by element, you've got the straight first drop, which now we actually found the sweet spot on this ride to be row 2. We rode in the row 1, we rode in the very back, And we rode in row 2 a couple times just because we didn't want to wait for the front row, the extra few trains. And we found that to actually be our favorite seat on the ride, more so than the front row. Typically there's 2 things on RMCs. You either really like the back because there's a lot of elements that have good yank, or you really like the front because you get the better sensation of speed, especially towards the end of the ride when you maybe start to lose a little bit of that speed. Not a bad seat on this ride. We rode in the middle. Not a bad seat on this ride. And we said the same thing about Steel Vengeance, that you can ride in the middle of the train. You and I, if you watch our POV from Media Day, we rode in row 7 for that. And we had a hell of a time. That's in the dead center of the train. And it was still the best ride in the world. This ride, row 2 was the magic row for us. So you've got the straight down drop. It's steep enough that you get a little bit of the float. You don't get the yank that you do in the back, but you get a little bit of the float on that first drop. You've got the little speed pop, which, is fine. Certainly not the standout element of the ride. A lot of the RMCs have that little speed hop at the bottom of the first drop now. Steel Vengeance has one. Twisted Colossus has one. That's sort of just something they've been doing. Then you do this first inversion element, which is actually 2 inversions. So the way I would describe it, if you know the outside bank turn or the overbank turn that Outlaw Run has, or Wicked Cyclone has one, it's probably better to compare it to Wicked Cyclone. Wicked Cyclone, after its first overbank and then it does the speed hill, you go into this turn that takes you 200 degrees. So you go up and you're completely upside down, you go a little bit beyond, and then you roll back out of it. This one takes that element, and instead of taking you just beyond 180 degrees, it takes you to 270 degrees. So it's sideways, opposite of the roll in which you entered. So you roll to the left, and then you're upside down, and you're getting the hang time at this point. You're falling out of your seat because you're going up. So you start to fall out of your seat as the train loses speed, and then you roll out of it so that you're 90 degrees on leaning to your right. So as you're floating out of your seat, you're now falling out of your seat to the right-hand side, but instead of completing the roll, you then roll back the way that you came from, much like Steel Vengeance sort of does when it does the fake out, coming out of the up high portion where it goes completely upside down and then rolls back out of it. This does that, but it takes it further. So you're falling out of your seat upwards, you're falling out of your seat to the side, and then while you're at that apex, you start to drop and gain speed and you roll back out of it. So now you continue to fall out and are essentially being thrown out of your seat as you roll back out of the element. It is a much different sensation than Outlaw Runs or Wicked Cyclones or even Steel Vengeance's element. It is a much different sensation, and it is very, very strange. Very, very odd indeed. Then you get a nice little double up, and on the top end of that double up, you come out and you do a bank to the left and you do a sweeping left-hand drop. Then you do a very standard airtime hill. More powerful than any of the 3 airtime hills on Twisted Timbers after that first turnaround. It's that type of airtime. And then you do another airtime hill immediately after that is the off-camber airtime hill that RMC has been known for. Then from there, you do you enter the turnaround similar to how Joker at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom does after its first drop. It does the what the hell do they call that thing there? I don't even know what they call it. Oh, the step up underflip, I think they call it on Joker. You do an element very similar to that. You do sweeping left hand turn, and then you're coming up to the left, and you do the outs, and then you do the quick overbank to the right hand turn, almost sort of like a wave turn, and you get thrown out that way. So at this point, we've had a little bit of Wicked Cyclone, we've had a little bit of Outlaw Run, we've had a little bit of Twisted Timbers, we've had a little bit of Joker and Twisted Cyclone in there. Then we get into the Steel Vengeance part of the ride, which is the second half. So Steel Vengeance, you drop off of the mid-course brake run and you do a double up followed by a double down. Untamed does the very, very same element executed, just shrunk a little bit to meet the size of the ride. And at this point, you still have great speed, excellent speed here all the way through. So you do the double up, then you do the double down. Then, if you remember, right after Steel Vengeance's final inversion, you do the little overbank turn where you fall out of your seat to the left. This does a very similar thing. It does an overbank to the left, but it stays straight. So you're not actually turning like you are on Steel Vengeance. It throws you out to the side, and you sort of hang out to the side, and then it straightens back up. Then you do an overbank turn, which is very low to the ground and actually provides, this surprised me, a nice bit of positive G-force. And if you're sitting on the left hand of the train and you're in the front there, you get a nice bit of lateral force as well, which I certainly did not expect. Then you do Steel Vengeance's finale has those 5 little bunny hops at the end. You do 3 of them. And the third one is like Wicked Cyclone has one where it does like a quick left bank and a quick right bank as you're cresting the hill. This one does that on the third one. And then when you come out of that, you do a right-hand turn that is not banked at all. So you do these 3 little bunny hops, and then you do the right-hand turn with no banking, so you get thrown to the left. And as you're being thrown to the left, you do like this 90-degree turn with no banking, and then you hit the barrel roll. So you're being thrown into the left side of the train, and then you roll to the left. So you've already got the lateral forces, and then you fall out of your seat in the direction that you were already being thrown. And then just for good measure, and you do this barrel roll at a high speed. It's not like the Wicked Cyclone ones where you sort of slowly, sluggishly sort of crawl your way through the inversion. Mm-hmm. This is sort of like the third Steel Vengeance inversion, which is the barrel roll before you hit a couple of those bunny hops. Very, very similar execution, but this is much lower to the ground. It doesn't have the elevation in the middle of the element. It's a very flat barrel roll. Very similar to how Outlaw Run's barrel rolls are, but they're right up against the ground, and you take them with more vigor. And then after that, you have one more of the little bunny hops, and then you come up to the brake run, very much how Steel Vengeance ends. And Andy, you remember on Steel Vengeance Media Day how every time we rode that ride, we looked at each other and we're just bent over at the lap bar and we're just laughing and we're speechless. That is the sensation that we had every time we came into the brake run on this ride. And there's not many rides that I can say have done that to me. I think Steel Vengeance is certainly one of them. Fury 325 is another one. I think Maverick is certainly another ride that has that sort of sensation where you just have to catch your breath a little bit before you can talk about just what just happened. X2, I think, is another one for sure. And Voyage, obviously. Voyage is a ride that I just find myself laughing every time we come into the brake run, and I need to take a big, deep breath. And Untamed is another one of those rides that gave me that sensation. I was super, super impressed. Pound for pound, in terms of thrills per inch or thrills per foot, Untamed is about as good as it gets.
Well, that's good because we were kind of worried, like, would it fall into, the category of an RMC that kind of dies at the end? It's running the new trains, though, so
it is
a benefit. So I think it has. I don't know. I don't understand the engineering behind it, but those new trains do something that allow these rides to keep their speed all the way to the end, and that seems to be really one of the best things about an RMC is if it's able to do that. That separates the good from the bad a lot of times. How does it treat those last few elements? Are you just crawling into the brakes? Are you doing a hard stop? What are you doing? The other thing that looks really cool that you haven't talked about this ride is the theme to it. And
that's where I was
cool those trains look.
That's where I was going to go next. So I'm not really sure what the trains are actually supposed to be. It almost looks like they're supposed to be like fireflies or something.
Yeah, like a bug of some sort.
Yeah, because it's got like the bug eyes. The trains are super cool. So when you see pictures of the trains, those are mirrors. Like those are cut mirrors on the train. So the entire train is like reflective of some sort, which is super, super cool. The other thing that's really cool, so the station is really cool. They have this nice waterfall coming down the side of the station. The sign is just the text, but it is broken and it looks very weathered. They do have in the queue, they have an old section of the wood coaster track with the old Robin Hood train sitting on it. And it looks like it's been overgrown. So that's kind of cool. The station is also very cool. So they have vines hanging from the station roof, and it looks like it's been overgrown and whatnot. And the lights are hanging from the vines and whatnot. And when the train gets dispatched, the lights start to flicker, and then it's like a tribal beat. So it's like doom, 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 and eventually you stand in the station for a couple of dispatches. So by the time you get on the train, what's everyone doing when the train gets dispatched? They're all clapping, doom, 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 and then of course. It doesn't really have a weeble wobble. It just does a 180-degree turn to get back to the lift hill. But the 180-degree turn, much like Twisted Cyclone, is banked to the outside, and you take it with a slow amount of speed. So you just kind of, elegantly sort of, or not so elegantly in my case maybe, fall out to the right side of the train. Every inch of this ride is fun. And those trains look great. The theme is really, really well executed. That entire area is themed to like the wilderness and being overgrown and being overtaken by nature. Which is what the brown track looks so cool because it really blends in. It's in the very back area of the park. It's completely lined by trees on the outside. Just very, very cool. There's a little river that runs through there. Very, very cool. And, if you follow me on social media, you know this already. But Untamed, I actually made my 700th coaster. So both of the big milestones I hit on the trip were at the Walibi parks. Now, typically I've been sort of the T-shirt guy. But one thing that I was able to get, and this particularly piqued my interest because of, the whole Mini Cooper deal and how the European license plates are. They were able to do custom European license plates there for like $12, and they made one, and it's hard to see here, but it's actually a metallic green. Mm-hmm. It's a nice green color, and they were able to do it in white. This was like $15 after like tax and whatever. And takes up no space in the luggage. It sits flat in there. It kept flat by my clothes there. So this usually hangs up on the wall there. Which is pretty cool. It's a European style license plate. I thought that was fitting to commemorate it. And since I didn't want to, I didn't want to make the paper sign like you've made fun of me for doing before. So I thought, well, we're in Europe. I'll get a European license plate and hang on to that outside the ride and take my picture in front of the ride sign with the
much classier than the Thuzy paper sign. Thuzy, step it up a little bit. Come on.
Come on. This was only like $12, $15.
That's classy. That's classy right there.
Well, and this is a nice souvenir. Can kind of go on the wall here even afterwards. I'm not going to take the paper sign that's got 600 or 700 written in Sharpie. I'm not going to hang that up anywhere. But this, I have this forever now. And it was very cheap. They made it right there for me. It took 5 minutes for them to make. And then we went back to the ride later on the day, rode it, and very, very cool. Lots of fun and very fitting, I think.
Are you going to get a T-shirt made, though, or have you stopped doing that?
I haven't had one made for the last couple, mainly because there was actually a guy in Rochester when I was in college that I had do a couple for me. And I haven't found anyone local here. I have done some digging. It's something that I certainly want to do. I know what the dates that I rode, what rides on were, so I could potentially do it. 500, 600, and 700, though, I have not gotten the custom T-shirts made for. Maybe that's something I will find one day, for sure.
You just gave me an idea, too, which... You just gave me an idea that I didn't think about how to. I've been kicking around an idea for a while, Danny Miller. A new project that I want to undertake. And you just gave me how I'm going to start that project. So thank you.
Uh-oh.
Just
Well,
dawned on me.
all right. Well, we're gonna have to talk about that offline then, because I think I might know. But ultimately, and here's the big question that everyone is gonna ask, right? I've talked about this ride. We've been talking well over an hour here now about these two parks. But hopefully there's some good stuff here. But people are gonna say, how does it rank among the other RMCs? Without question, second RMC, only to Steel Vengeance. Without question. For me, the question was, is it going to be better than Twisted Timbers? Because in my mind, that's one of the other ones. I also rank Wicked Cyclone and Iron Rattler very high. That's the next group there.
You're half right. I have Iron Rattler. I have Iron Rattler 2, and then Twisted Timbers 3 on my list.
Yeah, no question in my mind. After rides number 1 and 2, immediately said, "Yep, that's second to only Steel Vengeance."
If you throw in the wood coasters, how does that change?
Still number 2.
Still number 2. I would.
Still number 2. Yeah. Still number 2.
Steel coasters I like better than wood coasters.
I like it better than Outlaw Run. I like it better than Lightning Rod. I like it better than Goliath, for sure. Untamed. Outlaw Run, and we were talking about this, right? Outlaw Run, Lightning Rod, there's at least one thing in most of those other rides that I can say, well, that could have been a little bit better. Outlaw Run could have been a little bit longer. Lightning Rod, the launch isn't everything. The launch is certainly probably the weakest part of the ride. The launch could be a little bit more forceful, a little bit more exciting. We rode Untamed 12 times. We rode it in a lot of different seats, and we rode it in our favorite seat over and over again. And we could not find something that we did not like about that ride. And there are very, very few rides that I've ridden that I can say that about. Steel Vengeance being one of them, Voyage being one of them. Untamed is one of those rides that I can't find something to complain about, or even think, that could have been better if they did this instead. I can't find something on this ride that I can say that about. So for me, no question, second best RMC for me personally. There's a couple other people who rode that ride on the trip that had it like third or fourth. But generally speaking, everyone really thought it was one of the top RMCs for sure. So I expect this ride to be a big contender come Thrilling 32 time. I'm not saying it's going to be number 1. I don't think it will be. But I think we are kidding ourselves if we don't expect Untamed to be in the top 10 of the Thrilling 32 this year. I'm very, very confident that Untamed will make an appearance in the top 10 this year in the Thrilling 32. Top 5 maybe. I don't know. The top 5 certainly starts to get a little crowded. But for me, this is at the number 5 spot in my Steel Coaster rankings. That's how high it is.
And the RMC fanboys rejoice, right?
They do, and this is one that they got absolutely correct. And again, like you said, credit the newer trains, credit learning some things from some of their older projects. Credit whatever you want. Credit making it the RMC All-Star Coaster, taking some of the best things taking maybe the best element or the second best element from a lot of their rides, and then still making it feel like it's a smaller version of their best ride. And that is really what this ride turned out to be. And Walibi Holland in general was an excellent park, certainly a great roller coaster and thrill park. Walibi Belgium is sort of the more family-friendly version. Walibi Holland is certainly the thrill park of the two, and certainly has more of the higher thrills in the Netherlands compared to some of the other parks in the Netherlands, like Toverland and Efteling. Certainly this is the roller coaster park. This is the Six Flags, if you will, but certainly a higher quality than Six Flags. The park was cleaner. The park was pretty, lots of flowers, lots of greenery, no trash laying around, very friendly employees. very willing to help you. And some people just asking us what we thought of the park and what we thought of our days. And again, some of the elements that I mentioned at some of the other rides at these parks, just the little details that really enhance your experience. This could have been a very run-of-the-mill roller coaster park. Get in, ride your rides, get out. And this is a park that we went wire to wire. 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. when they closed, and we sat on Untamed pretty much and right up until 7 o'clock there.
Now, is your shirt silver or is it like holographic? 'Cause it's hard to tell.
It is shimmery, so yeah. It's hard to tell, but it's like an army green, and the letters are they're like laminated. So yeah. from a certain they're both silver. And then, like, from here, this section here, like these letters here, the top half have more of like a rust copper to them, and the bottom half is actually silver, and then it's got like a little bit of a hint of red in here by the end.
And that's like the ride sign. Like the ride sign does that. Yes,
the ride sign does that. So this is not tricking your eyes or anything. It actually does look like this. If you look at the ride sign, it mirrors the ride sign almost identically. And unfortunately, one thing we did learn is Europe just doesn't do T-shirts a lot, and they don't do them that particularly well because this doesn't have the park name on it or anything. I think the back has the Walibi logo back by the tag. But other than that, it's just the logo here. I have a Lost Gravity shirt that says "Ask Me About Lost Gravity" with the logo, and then another one says the Goliath shirt I got has G-O in really big blue letters, and it says "Go big, go fast, go Goliath," and that's just all it says. It doesn't even say
very
Walibi.
Six Flagsy.
It is very Six Flaggy, and it doesn't even say Walibi Holland underneath it. It just has the Wallaby logo on the back of the neck. So there's not really an indication of what it's from. But when I wear this shirt to the theme parks, coaster nerds wouldn't know what it is, anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. These two parks are two parks that sound like really fun places. That some of the stuff
both exceeded my expectations.
Fest. Let's be honest. But these two parks seem like legit parks that sound like they have a lot. Maybe, one obviously a lot better than the other. But like we said, when in 2021, when they get that new Intimate Hyper Coaster or Mega Coaster, that might change there too for that Wallaby. Yeah. So these two parks, really interesting discussion here. So far on my list, the two Wallabies and Phantasialand high up on my list. The rest of the stuff is kind of like it.
Yeah, Toverland is a good park, but it is a small park that is still developing. I would say right now, Phantasialand and the two Wallabies are certainly parks that you would want to seek out on your trip over there, especially if you're going over in a couple years after the expansion at Walibi Belgium. These are certainly Phantasialand for the experience and everything. And if you're just looking for some really badass roller coasters that have some good theming elements along with them, and just a really pleasant park to experience some thrills at, Walibi Holland is certainly the way to go there.
So thank you for always for joining us here on COASTER-net Uncut. That's the show we're doing right now. I'm, of course, Andrew Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm Danny Miller, remembering what show we're doing from.
Yes, thank you. Right on, Ride Warriors.
See you next time, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, I forgot that